Tonight, is America's patience with Afghanistan ending? In a remarkable rebuke, the U.S. ambassador lectures the Afghan people on the sacrifice of American troops.
My people, in turn, they're filled with confusion, and they grow weary of our effort here.
Will the American dream be harder to reach? Jim Axelrod has a first look at rules that would make home loans harder to get. How shocking does an image have to be to get people to stop smoking? Elaine Quijano has a preview of the new cigarette labels. And a surprising new therapy for combat stress. Mark Strassman on taking soldiers back to the fight through virtual reality.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. After 10 years of war, the Obama administration has told the Afghan people how it really feels. In a carefully worded speech, America's top diplomat in Afghanistan scolded the Afghan leadership and said, in effect, "How dare you complain when America's sons and daughters have died for your country?" The speech happened over the weekend, but we only got a hold of the pictures today. This is also the day that President Obama made up his mind on a reduction of U.S. forces. We have two reports, Chip Reed at the White House, and first, David Martin at the Pentagon with that rebuke to Afghanistan.
Carl Eikenberry, the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, has finally had enough of President Karzai's public denunciations of the American war effort.
I must tell you that I find occasional comments from some of your leaders hurtful and inappropriate. When we hear ourselves being called occupiers and worse, and our generous aid programs are being dismissed as totally ineffective and the source of all corruption, our pride is offended, and we begin to lose our inspiration to carry on.
Speaking at a university renovated with American tax dollars, Eikenberry seemed to unburden himself of years of pent-up frustration.
Mothers and fathers of fallen soldiers, spouses of soldiers who have lost arms and legs, children of those who have lost their lives in this country, they ask themselves about the meaning of their loved ones' sacrifice.
Eikenberry, who was the military commander in Afghanistan before becoming ambassador, has long been critical of Karzai. In this secret 2009 cable to Secretary of State Clinton, he wrote, "President Karzai is not an adequate strategic partner." Then, 3 weeks ago, Karzai, angered by another incident in which American forces accidentally killed civilians, publicly accused the U.S. of acting like an occupation force.
Afghanistan is an ally, not an occupied country.
Now, with his tour at an end, Eikenberry is responding in public.
When Americans who are serving in your country at great cost in terms of our lives and treasures, when they hear themselves compared with occupiers, told that they are only here to advance their own narrow interest, and likened to the brutal enemies of the Afghan people, my people, in turn, they're filled with confusion, and they grow weary of our effort here.
Eikenberry is accusing Karzai of more than just ingratitude. He's saying the president of Afghanistan doesn't get what this war is all about.
Thank you, David. The president has made a decision about bringing some of our troops home from Afghanistan. Early last year, he sent a surge of 30,000 additional troops, bringing the total there to about 100,000. The president said then that some of them would start coming back next month. Chip Reed is at the White House.
Well, Scott, the president did make his decision today, but White House officials say he won't announce it until a speech here at the White House tomorrow evening. Now, sources say the president will announce a timetable of anywhere from 9 to 18 months for pulling those 30,000 surge troops out of Afghanistan. The Pentagon wants the pace to be slow because they do not want to lose the gains that they have already made. But here at the White House, a number of officials, including Vice President Biden, have argued for a faster pace, and they make three basic arguments. Here they are. First, the killing of bin Laden. They say that means a big part of the mission has already been accomplished. Second, the cost of the war. It's staggering, more than $2 billion a week. And third, public opinion, which has turned against the war. Today, Secretary of Defense Gates, who has argued against a fast pace, said even he understands that public opinion is part of the equation.
The president has to take into account on any national security issue sustainability here at home, both among the public and in the Congress. And it goes without saying that there are a lot of reservations in the Congress about the war in Afghanistan and our level of commitment. There are concerns among the American people who are tired of a decade of war.
In fact, Scott, a recent CBS News poll shows that 64% of Americans want the number of troops in Afghanistan decreased.
Chip, put all this in context for us. How rapid a drawdown could we be talking about?
Well, we're talking about 5,000 to 10,000 troops over the next month or a number of months, and then after that, 30,000 troops over 9 to 18 months. But keep in mind, even after that, there will still be 70,000 troops here. That's twice as many as were in Afghanistan when President Obama came into office. So the president will argue pretty vigorously tomorrow that he is not abandoning Afghanistan.
Thanks, Chip. Chip mentioned that the war costs about $2 billion a week. We wondered what the bill comes to with all defense and development money together. So we checked with the Congressional Research Service, and they told us that taxpayers have spent so far more than $443 billion. We also have this program note. CBS News will bring you live coverage of the president's address to the nation tomorrow night at 8 Eastern Time. There is important news in Europe tonight that could reach all the way to Wall Street. The Prime Minister of Greece has survived a no-confidence vote, which means despite the riots in the streets, the Greek government will continue to drastically cut its budget in order to get a bailout loan. Elizabeth Palmer is in Athens.
It was a narrow victory for the government, but a defeat for thousands of protesters outside who are devastated with the state's plan for punishing austerity measures that are going to hurt.
But that's the price of avoiding a financial meltdown that could go global. European banks and governments are willing to lend Greece the emergency billions it needs to pay its creditors, but only if the Greek government moves first with deep cuts.
It's a risky move. A year ago, riots broke out when lenders forced Greece to introduce tax hikes on income and fuel and pension cuts of 20%. This time, the government is set to sell inefficient state companies into private hands, cutting thousands of jobs in an economy that's already shrinking. Unemployment is a stubborn 20%. Pericles Danopoulos lost his job a year ago. He was an accountant. Now he's an activist, raising 2 kids on a Social Security payment of less than $700 a month.
What do you tell them about why you haven't got a job and you can't find a job?
The truth. The truth. They understand.
But what Greeks don't understand is how they ran up $400 billion in debt. Partly it was generous social benefits that let them retire on average at 53 years old, but they prefer to blame official corruption. It's already shaping up to be quite the fight. Now, Greek unions have already organized a series of rolling blackouts, and there are already calls also for a general strike. Scott?
Liz, help us understand, how do troubles there relate to investors here at home?
Well, massive debt here, owned by European and some U.S. banks. Now, if they were to lose the billions of dollars they've already lent to Greece, then that could freeze up the world's credit market, similar to the crisis that followed the Lehman Brothers collapse back in 2008.
Thanks, Liz. Well, you knew that the housing market here at home was weak. Today, realtors reported that it has slowed even more. Last month, sales fell 3.8%, and it appears there's going to be a lot of pressure on home sales going forward because of new federal rules. They're designed to keep banks from making the same kind of risky loans that were behind the Great Recession. We asked Jim Axelrod to find out what all this means for home buyers and sellers.
Having just upgraded to a new house, Michael Sellers is worried 2 new proposed federal regulations will make it tougher to unload the starter home he and his partners still own.
The new rules are unfair to first-time home buyers.
This is tile, right?
Still a year away from going into effect, the proposed regulations would tighten standards for borrowers to qualify for the best mortgage rates. They'd need to have a 20% down payment and a debt-to-income ratio of 36%. meaning the monthly mortgage payment and all other debt, car loans, student loans, credit cards, could total no more than 36% of gross monthly income.
Seems to me it's going to limit people's choices of where they can live, and it's going to be very difficult for me as someone who is selling a house to actually get it sold.
We lost the basic premise of the ability to repay.
Mortgage broker Wendy Nastasi says it's an overdue correction to the dangerously loose standards that helped create the housing bubble.
And at the height of those loosening up of those guidelines, we were able to approve somebody at a 64% debt ratio.
Who could have thought that was a good idea?
I honestly don't know who thought it was a good idea, but ultimately it turned into a lot of defaulted loans.
So what would all this mean for the mortgage business? Consider this. Nearly 3 out of 5 borrowers who bought homes last year would not meet the new debt restrictions.
Yes, there are going to be people screaming from the rooftops that it's going to make it harder for people to buy homes.
Count Michael Sellers in that group.
5 years ago, it was more or less we walked in and we signed the papers and we had a mortgage.
A culture that led to a delinquency rate near 10% at its height. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
Speaking of the housing collapse, the nation's second largest bank settled fraud charges today. The government says J.P. Morgan Chase sold unwary investors mortgage-backed securities that were expected to fail, and fail they did. J.P. Morgan Chase will pay $154 million. The president sent him to the other side of the planet. Now he's come back to challenge Mr. Obama for re-election. Would a picture of a corpse on a pack of cigarettes make you think twice about smoking? And a historic meeting and a remarkable picture from South Africa when the CBS Evening News continues. Does the name John Huntsman ring a bell? That's the first problem Huntsman will have to overcome after he joined the race for the Republican presidential nomination today. But even if you've never heard of him, President Obama knows him very well, and Nancy Cordes tells us he'd prefer not to run against him.
I'm John Huntsman, and I'm running for President of the United States. Thank you all.
He may not be the best-known candidate, but former Utah Governor John Huntsman still makes the White House nervous. So nervous they named him ambassador to China 2 years ago, hoping he might drop any plans to run for president.
I know that John is the kind of leader who always puts country ahead of party.
No such luck. Today, Huntsman announced his bid standing before the Statue of Liberty.
We will conduct this campaign on the high road.
Then changed into a checkered shirt and headed to New Hampshire.
When I was governor, we cut taxes, we flattened rates, we balanced the budget.
It's that pedigree, combined with his deep pockets as the son of a billionaire, that has Democrats worried about a general election matchup. But first, the Mormon father of 7 would have to win over Republicans. And in a recent CBS News poll, 87% of them either didn't know who Huntsman was or had no opinion of him. Here's what his campaign wants them to know: that he dropped out of high school to play in a band, that he's obsessed with motorcycles, and that he intends to tread lightly when it comes to his former boss, the president.
I don't think you need to run down someone's reputation in order to run for the office of president.
But that might make it harder for Huntsman to get his voice heard when Mitt Romney and the rest of the Republican field are attacking the president at every opportunity.
He doesn't know how jobs are created.
Huntsman's decision to get into the race complicates things for Romney. They're both relatively moderate Mormon former governors who in some cases appeal to the same pool of big-time campaign donors.
Nancy, also today, a couple of top finance people left the Gingrich campaign. Newt Gingrich has lost most of his top campaign staff. I wonder who benefits if Gingrich drops out.
Most likely Texas Governor Rick Perry, Scott, not so much because their politics line up, but because Perry, who has been flirting with a race for the presidency, had 2 top advisors who were working for Gingrich. They've now been freed up to work for him if he decides to run. And aides say that the chances that he will get into the race now stand at about 50-50.
Thanks, Nancy. History was made today in South Africa when its first black president met the wife of America's first black president. Michelle Obama and her daughters visited Nelson Mandela in Johannesburg. The Obamas are on a week-long visit to Africa. Mandela is 92, in failing health, and is rarely seen in public these days. He gave the First Lady a copy of his new book. The new warning labels for cigarettes. They're hard to miss and hard to look at. That's next. For years, the number of American adults who smoke had been declining, but recently it's been holding steady at about 1 in 5. Today, Elaine Quijano tells us that the government gave us a look at new warning labels that it hopes will get smokers to quit.
The graphic images of rotting teeth, damaged lungs, and even a smoker's corpse shocked the longtime smokers we showed them to, like Michael Magistro.
You're killing yourself. I mean, look at it, got staples in them. Oh, it's nasty.
By fall 2012, the new warning labels will have to appear on the top, front, and back halves of cigarette packs, as well as 20% of cigarette print ads. Tobacco companies are suing the government, arguing the new large label makes their logos unreadable. New York City's aggressive TV ad campaign, along with higher cigarette taxes and smoking bans in many places, have led to a decline in smoking in New York, a 26% drop since 2002.
Oh my gosh.
While smoker Nikki Hulley is disturbed by the images, she's not convinced it will help people beat such a powerful addiction.
I want to say yes, but it's like so easy to look away.
Do you think you'll stop because of this?
I should stop because of this.
The labels will include a national hotline number to encourage smokers to take the first step towards quitting. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, New York.
Astronaut Mark Kelly, who commanded the next to last shuttle flight, said today that he's retiring from NASA and the Navy. That's so he can help his wife, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, in her recovery from an assassination attempt. For some combat veterans, putting on a new helmet is helping them cope with the nightmares of war. Their story is next.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by the Roundup brand. Kills weeds to the root so they don't come back.
Finally tonight, it's a provocative idea. Take a combat veteran who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder and force him back into battle. That's essentially what's happening through virtual reality in a remarkable new treatment. Mark Strassman tells us that it's saving soldiers and families.
We're taking rounds from this way.
Under that helmet, Jeff Matthews, a 27-year-old former Army staff sergeant, is back on the battlefield.
There's bullets everywhere.
And this is the sort of virtual reality combat he's seeing.
It says zip, zip, zip.
Part of an experimental treatment at Emory University for more than 90 vets with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Not so much what's going on as how you're feeling while it's going on. And that, I guess, is where the real therapy is.
Tell me how you're feeling in your body.
Just thinking I'm about to get shot.
Dr. Mary Rose Girardi coaxes him to reconnect with feelings like fear and panic that he thought he left on the battlefield.
This immersive form of therapy is something that gives you sights, sounds, smells if they're appropriate. It makes it much more difficult to avoid.
As you're telling what's happening, she's keying, gunshots, helicopters, rockets. But I'm using my imagination too while I'm doing it.
Matthews served 2 combat tours. The first was in Iraq in 2005. His next tour in Afghanistan is the one that haunts him.
Iraq was a cakewalk. Afghanistan was a lot more austere, a lot harsher. The enemy was a lot more bold. Just a lot of bad stuff.
Especially one patrol along the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Matthews and his squad were suddenly face down in the dirt, pinned down by Taliban fighters. His platoon sergeant and friend, Matt Blair, was next to him and took a bullet to the head. He survived, but...
For that split second that I thought he was dead, it was traumatic, and I guess I held that with me.
At some point, you have to go back to those feelings that you've put aside and bring them back to the front and process them.
Matthews never did, and came home withdrawn, edgy, angry.
Within 2 days of him coming home, we already started fighting.
Ashley Matthews saw her marriage collapsing.
And you felt he was hurt?
Yeah, he was hurt. And so was I, so we needed to repair that.
And without the therapy?
It would have ended. It would have ended completely.
The therapy's intense. For Matthews,
I'm getting stressed out.
the demons were real.
I know it's not reality. I know I'm not there, but you still get that rush of feeling inside of you.
Over and over, Matthews repeated his story in 5 90-minute sessions.
God, no, that is a terrible feeling.
And made peace with his combat memories.
You want to be a big hot shot, and you think that you understand what's going on, that you can do it yourself, but sometimes you really got to just suck it up and go get the therapy.
Mark Strassman, CBS News, Atlanta.
That's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.